Welcome to Being at Home with George. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to begin again with this idea of creating the possibility of saying yes to whatever comes up, especially the suffering. It's easy when we embrace what's good, but embrace everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, and generating the hope and making wise choices. For myself, speaking personally, and I know I'm not the only one, I'm dealing with the full spectrum of suffering, work, love, and play, and also being in a country where we just had an election and there's a tremendous amount of anxiety and suffering going on, or the anticipation of suffering. And so, one of the things that we need to be able to do is to say yes to the suffering, as challenging and difficult as it is, because life is difficult and it's been a difficult week. And the only thing we can control is our reaction or response to it. And so we always talk about this idea of we have self-awareness and we are responsible and we can choose to create space between stimulus and response. And in that space, we have the freedom and power to choose. And so people will say, well, why do I have to embrace suffering? Because by embracing it, by seeking to understand and accepting it, it ceases to be suffering because life is difficult. But once we embrace and understand that, then it's not difficult. And so, how do you do it? Some situation I've been through when I first got out of recovery, and it was really challenging because I had been in a detox for 21 days and I go back to work. And that afternoon, this compulsion to use came over me. And so what I did was I knew from my experience that I had to behave my way into proper thinking because if I thought the way I did before, I get the same result. So I went into a secluded place. In this case, it was a restroom, and I recited the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And so I focused on my internal locus of control, is what we call it. I focused on how I could self regulate, what I needed to do to move through the suffering. And it was suffering to have this compulsion to use impulse and then being able to say the serenity prayer over and over like a mantra. And then the obsession was removed from me. And so I have this idea of in that process, I had to behave my way into proper thinking because if I thought the way I thought before, I'd end up getting so much compulsion that I'd leave work and have to go get high or get a drink or whatever. And so this suffering we're going through, this angst, and a lot of it is what we expect to happen because right now there's nothing wrong. And so from this little moment of nothing being wrong, we can come from this place of let's focus on what we can control, the wisdom to understand what we can control and then control that little modicum of control, and it becomes more control. And we develop this ability to relate to something in a way where we empower, motivate, inspire ourselves because something happens and then we interpret what it means. And so to be able to interpret what it means, we have to practice what I call making the right effort. We have to be calm, we have to be mindful and ready to act. And so the calmness is we have this calm space where we're not compelled by desire or fear. And in that silence, there's a wisdom and a creativity. And by me being able to get into that, it was clear to me, oh, the serenity prayer. And then I exercised that little bit of control that I had and became more and more control. And then I actually moved through it. I had a direct experience of embracing suffering, understanding it and accepting it. And then I was able to let it go. And on the other side of that, there was a freedom, there was a joy of discovery, but there was also this sense of confidence that it doesn't matter what happens to me. What I can't control the environment, I can't control what happens in an election or whatever, but I can choose my response to it. And I choose to respond from a place of grace and ease, from a place of being empowered, inspired, and motivated, and seeing it as a challenge, not as something that shouldn't be happening. And that challenge allows me to access my latent abilities and to be calm, be mindful, be ready to act, and act in a way for the highest good.